The entire school assembly fell silent as Jennifer stood tied to a chair on the stage, her eyes fixed straight ahead, showing no emotion. The popular clique, led by the wealthy student council president, had orchestrated what they believed would be the ultimate humiliation of the quiet transfer student who had arrived 6 months ago. 300 pairs of eyes watched as they prepared to reveal what they claimed was the truth about her on the giant screen behind her. "Let's show everyone who you really are," the student council president announced with a smirk, clicking the remote. But instead of the embarrassing photos they had planned to display, the screen flickered to life with something entirely different. The silence in the auditorium grew heavier as official FBI logos appeared, followed by detailed financial records, encrypted communications, and surveillance footage. The smirk on the student council president's face froze, then slowly melted into horror. Jennifer's restraints suddenly fell away as she stood up, pulling a badge from her pocket. Several adults in suits emerged from the side entrances, blocking all exits. The students who had tied her to the chair began backing away, their faces pale with shock. "My name is Special Agent Jennifer Chen," she announced, her voice clear and strong, echoing through the stunned auditorium. "And you're all under arrest for participating in an international cybercrime ring operating through this school's network." The zip ties that had bound her fell to the floor as she stepped forward, no longer playing the role of the timid new student, but revealing herself as the youngest undercover agent in the Bureau's history. The ringleaders of the bullying campaign, the same students who had spent months tormenting her, now stood frozen in place, realizing too late that their chosen victim had been investigating them all along. Their plan to humiliate her had instead become the perfect trap, giving her exactly the public platform she needed to expose their criminal enterprise in front of the entire school. 6 months earlier, Jennifer had walked through the ornate gates of Westbrook Academy for the first time, her second-hand uniform drawing subtle glances from passing students. The prestigious private school's sprawling campus, with its ivy-covered buildings and manicured lawns, felt like a different world compared to her modest upbringing. Her arrival hadn't gone unnoticed by the FBI's cybercrime division, who had been tracking a sophisticated hacking operation that seemed to originate from within the school. The agency had chosen her for this undercover mission not just because of her age, but because of her extraordinary talent for computer science and her ability to blend in seamlessly. Jennifer's cover story was carefully crafted. She was presented as a scholarship student from a middle-class family, talented enough to earn her place but not wealthy enough to truly belong. The social dynamics of Westbrook played right into her hands, as the wealthy students barely gave her a second glance, considering her beneath their notice. During her first week, she kept to herself in the cafeteria, quietly observing the social hierarchies at play. The student council president, heir to a tech fortune, held court at the center table with his inner circle. They were the children of CEOs, politicians, and international business tycoons, all wrapped up in their own world of privilege and power. What these students didn't realize was that every casual conversation Jennifer overheard, every dismissive glance they threw her way, and every social media post they shared was being carefully documented. Her apparent isolation gave her the perfect cover to monitor their activities, especially their suspicious late-night computer lab sessions and the unusual patterns in the school's network traffic. It was during one of these quiet observation periods that the student council president first approached her. "You're pretty good with computers, aren't you?" he had asked, having noticed her typing speed in their shared programming class. "We have a little club that meets after school. You should join us." The invitation was delivered with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jennifer had accepted with just the right amount of grateful enthusiasm, playing the part of a socially awkward student eager for acceptance. That first invitation would prove to be her way into their inner circle, though not in the way they intended. They saw her as a useful tool, someone whose skills they could exploit while maintaining their social dominance over her. As she followed them to their first club meeting in the computer lab after hours, Jennifer could feel the weight of her hidden mission. The FBI had suspected that someone was using the school's prestigious name and resources as a cover for international cybercrime, but they needed proof. Now, watching these students casually bypass the school's security systems with practiced ease, she knew she was on the right track. The true challenge would be maintaining her cover while gathering evidence. One wrong move, one slip in her carefully constructed persona, and months of investigation could be compromised. But as Jennifer took her place at one of the computers, appearing nervous and eager to please, she was already mapping out their network architecture in her mind, preparing to unravel their entire operation. Over the next few weeks, Jennifer became a regular fixture at the club meetings, carefully playing her role while observing the group's dynamics. The student council president and his inner circle began to show their true nature, revealing layers of manipulation that went far beyond typical high school politics. They started small, testing her loyalty with minor tasks. "Could you help us access the school's grade database?" they asked, framing it as a harmless prank. Jennifer complied, appearing to break through the security while actually documenting their request. Each small victory made them trust her more, drawing her deeper into their world. The social dynamics became increasingly complex. During school hours, they would publicly ignore her or make subtle jabs about her scholarship status. But in their secret meetings, they relied heavily on her supposed technical skills. "You're lucky to be useful," the student council president would say, his words dripping with condescension. "Most scholarship kids just take up space." Jennifer noticed how they operated in layers of deception. The computer club was just the surface. Beneath it lay a sophisticated network of cybercrime operations. They were using their privileged access to the school's high-speed internet and their parents' business connections to orchestrate complex financial schemes. Their wealth and status provided the perfect cover. Who would suspect a group of privileged teenagers? The bullying began to escalate as they tested her boundaries. They would accidentally spill drinks on her books, spread rumors about her family, and create elaborate social media posts mocking her background. Each incident was carefully orchestrated to seem like typical teenage drama while actually serving as a warning: stay in line, do as you're told, or things will get worse. During one particularly tense meeting, they asked her to help them access offshore banking systems. "Think of it as a learning experience," they said, laughing at their own joke. Jennifer appeared to struggle with the task, buying time while secretly tracking their previous transactions. The evidence was building, but she needed to see the full scope of their operation. What they didn't realize was that each act of bullying, each demanding request, and each condescending remark was being meticulously documented. Jennifer's apparent vulnerability was her greatest strength. They felt so secure in their power over her that they became increasingly careless, revealing more of their operation than they intended. The turning point came when they decided to promote her within their hierarchy. "You've proven yourself useful enough," the student council president announced during a private meeting. "We're going to let you handle some bigger projects." The projects, as it turned out, involved international money laundering schemes that would make hardened criminals proud. As Jennifer left school that evening, clutching her worn backpack and maintaining her meek demeanor, she knew she was getting close to having all the evidence she needed. The group's arrogance would be their downfall. They never imagined that the quiet scholarship student they loved to torment was actually their biggest threat. During her regular classes, Jennifer began to show glimpses of her true capabilities, but in a carefully controlled way. She would solve complex coding problems in computer science class just quickly enough to catch attention, but not so brilliantly as to raise suspicion. Her test scores gradually improved, creating a natural progression that seemed to come from dedicated studying. The school's teachers started to take notice. During one memorable programming competition, Jennifer accidentally revealed her exceptional skills by solving a challenge that even the instructor had struggled with. The student council president's group watched with growing unease as their supposedly controllable pawn began to show unexpected depths. "You never mentioned you were this good," they confronted her after class, their friendly tones carrying veiled threats. Jennifer had prepared for this moment, playing it off with carefully rehearsed anxiety. "I've been studying really hard," she stammered, looking down at her feet. "I just want to keep my scholarship." Her apparent fear seemed to satisfy them, but she noticed how they began watching her more closely. Behind the scenes, Jennifer was piecing together the full scope of their operation. Late at night, in a secure FBI facility, she would report her findings to her handlers. The cybercrime ring wasn't just about grades or petty theft, these students were using their family connections to facilitate major international financial crimes. Their parents' business networks provided the perfect cover for moving massive amounts of money across borders. One evening, while pretending to work on their latest project, Jennifer discovered something that made her blood run cold. Hidden in their encrypted files was evidence of identity theft on a massive scale. They weren't just stealing money, they were destroying lives, using stolen identities to create elaborate financial schemes that left innocent people financially ruined. The student council president's group, meanwhile, had begun to show cracks in their perfect facade. Jennifer's improving academic performance had sparked jealousy and resentment. They increased their bullying, but now it carried a desperate edge. "Remember where you came from," they would whisper in the hallways, their threats becoming less subtle. During a crucial computer lab session, Jennifer purposefully made a small coding error that revealed even more of her capabilities. The group's reaction was immediate and hostile. "Who are you really?" demanded one of them, leaning over her keyboard. Jennifer's hand shook, not from fear, but from the effort of maintaining her cover while documenting their reaction. The evidence was mounting, but Jennifer needed one final piece to complete the investigation. She noticed the group having heated discussions, watching her with increasingly suspicious eyes. They were planning something big, something that would put her in her place once and for all. Little did they know, their planned humiliation would give her exactly the opportunity she needed. As she left the computer lab that evening, Jennifer could feel the weight of their stares. The next few days would be crucial. Everything she had worked for was coming to a head, and she knew that the group's next move would either make or break the entire operation. Their pride and arrogance had led them to plan something very public, exactly what she had been waiting for. The bullying campaign took a dramatic turn as Jennifer's academic success became impossible to ignore. She had just received the highest score in the school's history on the advanced computer science exam, and the student council president's group was furious. Their carefully maintained image of intellectual superiority was being threatened by the scholarship student they had thought they controlled. Their retaliation was swift and calculated. Anonymous posts began appearing on the school's social media networks, spreading vicious rumors about how Jennifer had cheated her way into Westbrook. Her locker was repeatedly vandalized, her books disappeared, and threatening notes appeared on her desk. But what they didn't realize was that each act of intimidation was being carefully documented as part of a growing body of evidence. During one particularly tense lunch period, the group orchestrated a public humiliation. As Jennifer carried her tray across the cafeteria, someone deliberately tripped her, sending her lunch crashing to the floor. The entire room erupted in laughter, phones recording her embarrassment. The student council president stood up, offering mock assistance while actually whispering, "Know your place. This is just the beginning." But Jennifer had anticipated their escalating tactics. Hidden in her phone was sophisticated recording software that captured every threat, every incident of harassment. Each piece of evidence was immediately encrypted and transmitted to her FBI handlers. The bullies' increasing aggression was actually helping to build an airtight case against them. The turning point came during a crucial meeting of their computer club. Convinced of their superiority, the group began openly discussing their larger criminal operations in front of Jennifer. They detailed plans for their biggest scheme yet, a coordinated cyber attack that would siphon millions from various international banks. Their arrogance had finally led them to make a crucial mistake. Jennifer noticed subtle changes in their behavior. They began testing her loyalty more aggressively, demanding she participate in increasingly criminal activities. The student council president would stand behind her as she worked, watching her every keystroke. "You're part of this now," he would remind her. "Don't forget what we have on you." The pressure intensified when they discovered Jennifer had been invited to speak at the upcoming school assembly about her academic achievements. The group saw this as a direct challenge to their authority. Late one evening, they cornered her in the computer lab. "You need to decline the invitation," they demanded. "Or we'll make sure everyone knows what you've really been doing in our little club." What they didn't realize was that Jennifer had been carefully manipulating their surveillance cameras during this confrontation. Every threat, every intimidating gesture was being recorded from multiple angles. Their attempt at intimidation had given her exactly the kind of evidence she needed. As she left school that day, Jennifer could sense that everything was coming to a head. The group was planning something dramatic for the assembly, something designed to destroy her completely. They had no idea that their planned public humiliation would become their own undoing. The stage was set for a confrontation that would expose everything, just not in the way they expected. The truth about Jennifer's real identity and mission began to crystallize in a secure FBI briefing room, far from the watchful eyes of Westbrook Academy. She sat with her senior handlers, reviewing months of accumulated evidence. The cybercrime ring she had uncovered wasn't just a group of privileged teenagers playing with technology, it was one of the most sophisticated operations the Bureau had ever seen. "What you've discovered goes beyond the school," her lead handler explained, spreading out documents across the table. The evidence revealed a complex network that used the students' family connections to facilitate international crimes. Their parents' businesses had unknowingly become conduits for massive financial fraud, with the teenagers exploiting their access to corporate networks. Jennifer's undercover work had revealed something even more disturbing. The student council president wasn't just a school bully, he was a prodigy who had built a dark web marketplace by age 15. Using his father's tech company as cover, he had created a platform for selling stolen data that had caused billions in damages worldwide. The FBI team was particularly concerned about their latest discovery. Hidden in the encrypted files Jennifer had accessed was evidence of a planned cyber attack that would dwarf their previous operations. The group was preparing to simultaneously breach multiple international banking systems, using their parents' business credentials as access points. Back at school, Jennifer maintained her cover while watching the group become increasingly paranoid. They had begun to notice small inconsistencies in their system logs, traces of her documentation that she had intentionally left visible. Their response was to pull her even closer, forcing her to attend additional club meetings where they monitored her every move. During one such meeting, Jennifer witnessed a video call that confirmed the FBI's worst fears. The student council president was coordinating with international hackers, planning their massive attack to coincide with the upcoming school assembly. They saw the event as the perfect distraction. While all eyes would be on their planned humiliation of Jennifer, their real operation would be quietly destroying lives around the globe. The pressure was immense. Jennifer knew that if she made one wrong move, months of careful investigation would be wasted. She had to appear completely unaware of their larger scheme while gathering the final pieces of evidence needed for prosecution. Every keystroke she made was a careful balance between maintaining her cover and documenting their crimes. One afternoon, she overheard them finalizing their assembly plans. "We'll expose her in front of everyone," they laughed, unaware that their own exposure was imminent. Their plan to publicly humiliate her would give the FBI exactly the opportunity they needed to catch the entire group in the act. As the day of the assembly approached, Jennifer met one last time with her handlers. The operation had grown far beyond its original scope, now involving multiple international law enforcement agencies. Everything hinged on the next 24 hours, and on Jennifer's ability to maintain her cover until the perfect moment to reveal her true identity. The morning of the school assembly dawned with an electric tension in the air. Jennifer arrived early, knowing the group had spent the entire night preparing their special presentation. She could see them huddled near the auditorium entrance, sharing knowing smirks as she passed. Little did they know, FBI agents were already positioned throughout the school, disguised as maintenance workers, substitute teachers, and visiting parents. During first period, the student council president approached her desk with an envelope. "We need you to help set up some special equipment for the assembly," he said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. Inside the envelope was a USB drive, which Jennifer knew contained the software they planned to use for their global cyber attack. As she worked in the auditorium, pretending to struggle with the AV equipment, Jennifer was actually implementing the final phase of the FBI's plan. Each connection she established was carefully monitored, creating a perfect record of the group's activities. She could feel their eyes on her as she worked, their confidence growing with each passing hour. The assembly was scheduled for the afternoon, and the school began to fill with students and staff. Jennifer noticed several of her handlers taking their positions, all wearing casual clothes that helped them blend perfectly with the parent volunteers who often attended school events. The trap was set, but timing would be crucial. Just before the assembly began, the group made their move. They cornered Jennifer. Backstage, their usual arrogance now tinged with barely contained excitement. "Time for your big moment," the student council president sneered, producing a set of zip ties. Two of his friends grabbed her arms, while another began securing her to a chair they had positioned center stage. The auditorium fell silent as students filed in, their eyes drawn to the unusual scene on stage. Jennifer could hear whispers and see phones being raised to record what everyone assumed would be an epic public humiliation. The student council president took the microphone, beginning his carefully rehearsed speech about exposing the truth. Behind the scenes, their real plan was unfolding. Hidden programs began executing on the school's network, attempting to launch their massive cyber attack. They had timed everything perfectly, or so they thought. What they didn't realize was that every line of their code was being redirected, captured, and logged by FBI systems. As the student council president dramatically reached for the remote to start their presentation, Jennifer caught a subtle signal from one of her handlers. The moment she had been working toward for 6 months was finally here. She watched as the group's triumphant expressions slowly transformed into confusion, then horror, as their own crimes began displaying on the giant screen behind her. The zip ties around her wrists suddenly felt loose. They had been specially designed by the FBI to release on command. Jennifer remained still, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal her true identity. The student council president was frantically clicking the remote, his carefully constructed facade crumbling with each passing second. The auditorium erupted in gasps as Jennifer stood from the chair, her FBI badge glinting under the stage lights. The student council president's remote clattered to the floor as federal agents emerged from every exit, their movements precise and coordinated. The look of dawning comprehension on the faces of the cybercrime ring was a sight that would be remembered by everyone present. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jennifer's voice rang clear through the speakers, "what you're witnessing isn't just about school bullying. These students have been running an international cybercrime operation using the school's resources and their parents' business connections." The screen behind her displayed a cascade of evidence, banking records, encrypted communications, and surveillance footage. The student council president tried to run but found himself blocked by agents who had been posing as janitors for months. His closest associates, the same ones who had delighted in tormenting Jennifer, were now being detained one by one. Their phones and laptops were confiscated, each device containing additional evidence of their crimes. Jennifer continued her revelation, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to the meek persona she had maintained for months. "While you watched them bully and demean me, they were stealing identities, laundering money, and planning a massive cyber attack that would have affected millions of lives." The evidence continued to scroll across the screen, showing the true scope of their operation. Parents who had been invited to the assembly under various pretexts began to realize the magnitude of what was happening. Some of the most prominent families in the community were seeing their children led away in handcuffs, their carefully maintained facades of perfection crumbling in real time. The school principal, who had been briefed just moments before the assembly, stood ashen-faced as he learned how his school's network had been used for international crimes. The elite institution's reputation would need serious rehabilitation, but the FBI had already prepared a plan to help implement proper security measures. One of the most dramatic moments came when the student council president, finally comprehending his situation, tried to blame everything on his associates. "They forced me into it," he shouted, pointing at his friends. Jennifer calmly played a recording of him bragging about being the mastermind behind the operation, his own words sealing his fate. As the arrests continued, students began connecting the dots between various incidents they had witnessed over the past months. The exclusive computer club meetings, the expensive cars some students suddenly started driving, the unexplained absences, it all made sense now. What they had dismissed as typical rich kid behavior had been signs of something far more sinister. The assembly that was meant to be Jennifer's humiliation had instead become a masterclass in justice. As the last of the cybercrime ring was led away, she addressed the stunned audience one final time. Remember this day. Remember that appearances can be deceiving, and that true character isn't about wealth or status, it's about the choices we make. In the weeks following the dramatic arrests at Westbrook Academy, the impact of Jennifer's undercover operation rippled through multiple communities. The story made international headlines, not just for the sophisticated cybercrime ring that had been exposed, but for the broader message it carried about appearances, privilege, and justice. The FBI's case was airtight. With Jennifer's meticulous documentation and the evidence gathered during the assembly, prosecutors had everything they needed. The student council president and his inner circle faced serious charges, their status as minors offset by the severity and sophistication of their crimes. Their families, many of whom had been unknowingly implicated in the schemes, were cooperating with authorities to make amends. Westbrook Academy underwent a profound transformation. The new administration, appointed after a thorough review, implemented extensive reforms. The toxic culture of privilege and bullying that had allowed the cybercrime ring to flourish was systematically dismantled. Scholarship programs were expanded, and a new emphasis was placed on character development alongside academic achievement. But perhaps the most significant change was in the students themselves. Those who had witnessed the events of that assembly had learned powerful lessons about judgment and appearances. The same students who had once looked down on the scholarship girl now understood how their own prejudices had blinded them to reality. Jennifer's role didn't end with the arrests. She began working with the FBI's Youth Outreach Program, speaking at schools across the country about cybersecurity and bullying. Her story resonated particularly strongly with students who felt marginalized or intimidated by wealth and status. She showed them that true power comes from integrity, not intimidation. The former members of the cybercrime ring, facing the consequences of their actions, provided a different kind of lesson. During their sentencing, several expressed genuine remorse, finally understanding how their sense of entitlement had led them down a dark path. Their story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of privilege without responsibility. Schools nationwide began implementing new cybersecurity protocols based on the vulnerabilities exposed at Westbrook. Parents became more aware of their children's online activities, realizing that technical skills without ethical guidance could lead to disaster. The case sparked important conversations about digital citizenship and moral responsibility in the age of technology. Jennifer returned to Westbrook 1 year later as a guest speaker. Standing on the same stage where she had been tied up, she addressed a very different audience. The students who had once witnessed her apparent humiliation now saw her as a symbol of courage and justice. Her message was simple but powerful: your worth isn't determined by your wealth, your status, or what others think of you. It's determined by your choices and your character. The legacy of the Westbrook case extended far beyond the school's walls. It became a powerful reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that bullies aren't always as powerful as they seem, and that justice, while sometimes slow, eventually prevails. Most importantly, it showed that one person, standing firm in their principles, can create change that impacts thousands of lives. The story has concluded. Would you like to discuss any aspects of it in more detail?